The basic message is the following. Unless we humans can bounce out of the default mode to which we regressed for most of our history during times of economic contraction, but more broadly resource depletion and contraction, then we are going to usher in conditions that make humans behave in truly abominable and gruesome ways, and that to begin working towards finding ourselves on a trajectory towards that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, we can look inward and we can see in ourselves when these more animalistic basic impulses well up and suggest actions that our higher selves, more neocortical higher selves, would think of as diabolical and immoral. Wow, sometimes the early morning breathwork sends me off to a dark, dark place. Look at that. 5:40. Sometimes through breathwork, and I've also felt this like after having availed myself of certain exogenous substances. There's this place I sometimes go to, but it happened there during breathwork to an extent. No, it was like a highly concentrated version of this like thing that happens to me from time to time, depending on the substances I consume and the intensity of breathwork, let's say. Sometimes together, yeah. But this place is like I'm shown my animal nature, like literally me being an animal. I was doing breath work on the bed, and I actually began looking about myself, and I thought of myself, you look like a fucking sheep who just looks around the field. Like there was that lack of consciousness, for want of a better word, and yet I could perceive the lack of consciousness, which itself implied some sort of consciousness. Now, I'm not the type of guy who's like sort of woo-woo about this whole consciousness thing. Consciousness to me is an evolved function that can be described in many ways. One of the ways I've recently fallen upon describing it is just the capacity to abstractly think, evaluate situations, and act from there, which obviously involves perception, which obviously involves our more animal selves. This thing is an animal, and somehow I could perceive my animal side without the consciousness through my consciousness. Fuck off, that's weird. But yeah, sometimes I go there. So I'm gonna write something dark this morning. Okay, I just finished writing that piece. Human animals looking at our darkest selves. The basic message is the following. unless we humans can bounce out of the default mode to which we regressed for most of our history during times of economic contraction, but more broadly resource depletion and contraction, then we are going to usher in conditions that make humans behave in truly abominable and gruesome ways. And that to begin working towards finding ourselves on a trajectory towards that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, we can look inward and we can see in ourselves when these more animalistic basic impulses well up and suggest actions that our higher selves, more neocortical higher selves, would think of as diabolical and immoral. And that this is a relevant message today in hypernovel modernity because of how we are continuing to deplete the likes of our soil, natural resources, at a rate that far exceeds their replenishment. If we shifted our perspective from seeing that soil matrix as natural capital that is, for all intents and purposes, inexhaustible, which is how we're currently behaving and treating the soil matrix, unless we can shift our perspective from seeing it like that to seeing the soil matrix and the resources produced by said matrix as interest that annually replenishes itself on top of the abundance of capital. Abundance of capital that accumulated over many millennia before humans even evolved into this modern anatomical form. Unless that shift in perspective can occur, then the diabolical genetic program that has successfully gotten us to where we are today will spell disaster. So it has reached its point of paradoxical counterproductivity, where what has worked in the past no longer works under modern circumstances because of the godlike technological powers that we have developed for ourselves. And so we are in a point in history now where it's incumbent upon us as individuals, but also as a collective, as a global population, to recognize this for what it is, to recognize our situation nowadays for what it is, and to begin working towards solution sets or ongoing management plans that can address the predicaments we face, the complex predicaments we face, and ensure that we not only survive but thrive and really manifest that world that I think we all know is possible, a way more beautiful world where instead of doing the unsustainable things and polluting the world and liquidating the planet to the point where it can no longer sustain us, we can actually work with nature, as hippie as that sounds. We can actually work in such a way that regenerates the resources we need to survive, and it can regenerate these resources at a rate that exceeds or is at least on balance with what we demand, which then means we can live sustainably for an indefinitely long period of time into the future. Not as individuals, of course, but as humanity as a whole, which is itself an honourable and noble goal that we can all derive a sense of meaning and purpose from. So, this is a beautiful world we live in, and we have many complex problems to solve, and it's up to us as individuals and as a collective to see this for what it is, to see our situation for what it is, and begin working with the constraints we know we must work within. As in, there are planetary boundaries, like the soil being depleted to a point where it can no longer sustain us. That's a boundary that we would do well not to cross. such that we can sustain ourselves and continue to thrive, because this world is beautiful and we can ensure that it remains as such for ever.